some PC games. Over the holidays, I had set up my brand new PC, brand new innards into it. I got a 8700K Intel i7. I'm running a MSI Meg Z390 Ace, and I get about 16 gigabytes of RAM in it, and it's kicking along pretty well. I'm probably going to up that here in the coming months to probably about between 32 and 64. I haven't really decided yet. Depends on what the overall prices on memory would be in the near future. All those specs you can find down in my spec box on Twitch, on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Hydra9. And I may put that up somewhere as well, somewhere else as well on the YouTube channel. Give me one moment here. I've got a little bit of echo going on here in my ears, so I need to cut that out. Just go ahead and enjoy the music while I'm fixing that. There we go. So, what I'm playing right now, something new you're going to see from me, is Project Hospital. I've been pretty involved with this game for a couple of weeks now, since I pulled it down from the Steam Workshop. I've had a blast playing it, and I want to showcase what I'm doing in it, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll follow up on them as soon as possible. Right now, as you see on the screen, what I'm doing is working on basically the emergency room area. This is the first floor. It's going to be a multi-story building, as you'll see in later episodes. So far, I've got, I think, 5 episodes recorded at the moment, and so these will be popping out here in the near future. So I'm doing the basic layouts right now of how I want the floors. A lot of it was a learning process. There wasn't a lot of information that I initially found, and there wasn't really a tutorial, I guess. Maybe there was, maybe I just overlooked it, but so a lot of this initial layout is pretty ad hoc, and you're gonna see me, make some mistakes and make some reconfigurations and whatnot. And up until about the 5th episode, I didn't even realize that you could actually lay out the corridors by themselves. So you'll see all this kind of dark space there, and you see I just laid down 2 corridors just now. And a lot of that just comes down to unfamiliarity with how the game works. But the point of the corridors was to kind of give walking space between different sections of the hospital. And so you could lay out all sorts of things, such as the room setup and the all the equipment in there. It can get very detailed very quickly, so proceed with caution. I was using the basic included layouts that were already available initially, just to kind of get a feel for the game and work with what worked normally at the time. So you can see there, I've already hired a lot of personnel, and I apologize for not showing this from Origin, but I had already started on it, and I realized that OBS had messed up the initial capture that I had done, and so I'd already laid down the foundations and everything. There are some glitches and some bugs in there. You'll see them from time to time, such as the ambulances. They don't lay down where they should, according to what I understand about the interface, and so I need to kind of do a little bit more research on that and kind of figure out, am I doing something wrong, or is it just something that's bugged out with the game? Because it very well could be. I mean, it's the title's not been out for too long, but I think it was in early access for a good while. And but yeah, we're just gonna run through this. This was about 2 hours worth of capture, maybe a little bit over that, and but I've obviously sped it up so you're not watching just a grind session. And maybe on the Twitch channel I'll do that in the near future, where I'll actually grind through it and we can do it live together. But for now, we're just going to be showing the layouts and the effects and the items that are included in there. I built all the walls and I glassed in everything because I just had this vision of like this multi-story glass building with like these overhead corridors that are kind of staggered off from each other, going across the middle, and maybe there would be this little garden area in the very middle of it. I did find out that there were a few limitations with that and just didn't make sense. So all I could lay down was grassland at the time. I'm hoping maybe they'll come out with like some fountains or something like that later on. Because if you've ever been to, modern day hospitals, you'll notice that there's a lot of things like that that kind of help heal the mind as much as the hospital helps heal the body. And that was my intent behind this. I took a lot of it from reference sites, hospitals that I'd already been in, because I've been in the hospital a lot over the years. But a lot of these rooms are already labeled, and I'm not sure how well they'll come up on the screen for you, but what we're looking at right now are some diagnostic offices and whatnot, some spaces for the doctors to do more analysis of the patients that come in, and you'll actually be able to direct patients in the game to certain departments once you build the departments up. It gets very granular. You can go down and direct which type of tests go on what patient at what time per time. It's really a special game. It's well thought out. It's only, again, as I noted before, it's got some hiccups, but overall, I really enjoy playing this game. I can sink a lot of hours into this, playing this game, and just kind of losing myself in it and letting my creative brain build these structures and this logistical framework to be able to handle the amount of customers that I eventually want to get into the hospital. And over time, you're going to see that increase substantially. Right now, there's not much going on, and that's namely because I didn't fully comprehend the way that the departments really worked. And so at one point, I had multiple departments, but I had added these components from these other departments in there without realizing that it was still assigned to the first department. So you might see that down at the bottom left, where you've got a big looks like a flashing light in the bottom left there. That's actually the symbol for the emergency department, and the other is radiology, internal medicine, surgery, and stuff like that. As you go along the little gray bar there, a translucent gray bar. So, again, all a learning experience. You're watching my foibles here as much as my triumphs. So, consider yourself learning with me on this, and I do hope you'll enjoy what we got here. So I was trying to figure out from there, as the menu you just saw, I was trying to figure out, what I was going to save it as, and I input it as the name of what I was going to name the hospital. And so in this case, it was going to be St. Kazanova. I thought it was a great name, so I figured I would go ahead and name the hospital that, and I would name the save file that, and so that way I can keep track of it. I'm not sure if it automatically saves. I haven't really been paying attention to it, but I've been manually saving a lot. So you can see how it transitions right now, where it transitioned between the wall area and then it transitioned between the different types of actual room types. That's all selections that you can do. So I added an elevator, I added a waiting room there on that upper right part with the person sitting down, as you can see on that screen right there. Nurses station, on-call doctor, staff. There's a receptionist area up front that was in the bottom left a moment ago, where that bell is. That can be dinged. And still trying to get a feel for how the layout's going to lay down in there. That's an observation room. I put it mistakenly, and I was doing this based off of my experience, but mistakenly I had built an ICU in the ER. And I didn't realize at the time that the ICU was actually its own separate department. So it didn't really mesh very well when we were trying to, lay it out in the floor plan there. So now I'm trying to figure out the best way. I figured, okay, well, maybe patients in like an observation type area want to, have natural sunlight, because they're not really being worked on. It's not a trauma area. It's more kind of waiting around. What I'm placing down right now is a cleaning room, and I put those strategically throughout the building to be able to cover the most area. I made a mistake and I put a elevator that you just saw there. That caused me a lot of headache with later layouts when I built other floors later on. So again, be mindful of your space whenever you're playing this game. Whatever your structure that you containerize this into, that's the structure that's going to govern everything about your building later on, unless you want to really go through and deconstruct a lot of set pieces on there. And I mean, it's a real tough cookie once you get like a vast amount of area laid out in there. And so there you see I was trying to lay down more corridor places. I was like, why aren't these connecting? It doesn't really make sense to me. And again, I didn't realize how those corridor areas could be laid out to where you can overlap them by basically one grid square, and that will actually make that entire corridor between two corridors connect. Didn't know that, so that would have been very helpful to know up front. But again, maybe I missed the resources that was talking about that, but I was working with what I understood of the game at the time. Right now, I'm placing stuff around the area there from inside that break room area, and so that I can give free access to that door from them to go into that that observation unit there from the break room without having to go through the rest of the hospital. The intent was to have that waiting area there in the center, so that it could be its own separate entity without impeding the hospital staff from doing their job. Over time, all this changes, and you'll see that in later, either in this recording or in the next one, I believe. A lot of that changes, opens up, and I wall off some areas and create corridors where there weren't corridors before. Right now, I'm trying to add staff to these different rooms so that the area is well staffed both day and night. Initially, I only had it staffed for the day, and that was a real problem because I had this assumption without really paying attention to those two characters, the sun and the moon there. I had this assumption that somehow the doctors were going to work out who was going to be on day and who was going to be on night shift. So, silly me, I was in the middle of this situation where I had people on day, and I was like, why is there no one working on night? It didn't make any sense, and so then I ended up having to hire extra staff for the night staff. And I make that mistake a few more times because it's just not something that's directly in mind, but over time I eventually get it. what you just saw there on that left-hand side was the mapping of the different departments and the minimum requirements for those departments to exist. So you have to fulfill those minimum for those minimum requirements. And that'll allow you to go through the rest of the game and open that department up and actually start feeding those customers. Now you can see where I'm resetting those areas, trying to kind of expand that waiting area a little bit, redoing the corridors, and I'm going to wall off those areas in the corridors that should be sectioning off the area to what was then the ICU unit and the trauma units, as you would see in a normal hospital, but it's not something that I understood at the moment, and how the mechanic worked in this game. I apologize if this mic is not as good as it normally is. I haven't received the converter cable for my Turtle Beach headset. Eventually I will be setting up my former studio system in here, and I'll be linking that into the computer for an actual professional studio mic to be used on future clips. So I'm working with what I got right now set up at the moment. I was just really so excited to get this first episode out. Eventually, as I start playing other games and building them, you'll begin to see, you'll begin to hear better audio from me in the future. There I am again, going through and putting the right people in the right places for the night shift. Truth be told, the ER that we're building right now was basically my big experiment to see how does all this actually work. It was important to me to kind of get a baseline as to how this will work. I think in future episodes, when I do another hospital outside of this project, I'm going to go about a couple things several different ways in terms of how I lay stuff out before I start building stuff up. Now you can see the glitches that I'm having there with the ambulances, where they went park in the other parking spaces, and they would only park in those parking spaces over there. And never once have I seen any of my ambulances go anywhere, so I'm a little bit perplexed by that. I'm assuming it's only strictly for capacity and not much else. I really hope you're enjoying the music. If anybody's interested in where these tracks are coming from, it's a service called Epidemic Sound. And it's namely for creators, content creators. But they do have a 30-day free trial. Feel free to go out there and take a look at it. You can, if you have your own channel, you can license music to it. I really went with the jazz because when I'm creating something, jazz seems to bring out the creativity in me. It kind of helps balance my thinking, and while I'm trying to do the layouts for this stuff. I didn't have it playing when I was doing this, but I will in the future when I'm building this out, since it's really readily available in my library now. And outside of the microphone, I do apologize for my my voice. It sounds a little bit scratchy today. I've been in and out of just being under the weather since December, really, since Christmas. I got really sick during Christmas. Caught the flu, something hardcore. It did all sorts of mess to my upper respiratory and my sinuses and my throat. And I've just been in recovery mode ever since, so I don't really sound 100% right now, and I apologize about that. But hopefully in the future episodes, my voice will be back to its norm. You can see right there I'm looking at a patient. The patient was brought in. They have issues. I'm selecting, I'm going through the different types of assessments that can be done, and the different types of treatments are down there at the very bottom. You can prescribe the certain treatments if you know what's going to help ahead of time. You may actually end up saving that patient's life, because the AI is only able to do so much initially, and then it will ask for help. But if I can get a leg up on it ahead of time, I would rather do that. What you see there is the radiology department. Is what I'm building out now, and the intent was for radiology to be as close to the ER as possible. You'll notice in most hospitals that you go to, they're usually in fairly close proximity. Same thing with the ICU, but oddly enough, they're not integrated in the game. And I guess it makes sense, because ICU would actually be its own department. I just didn't consider that ahead of time, because I've seen them merged in hospitals before, where the ICU was a part of the ER, or maybe like a sub-department, within a larger division that the ER was contained in. So there I'm creating a new foundation layout area. Still monitoring the patients, making sure they're good. And you see there, I caught on to the idea that the ER needs to be within its own ER ecosystem. That red hand at the top of the radiology on the left-hand side means that that whole operation there was closed, and it will remain closed until I fulfill those minimum requirements that you would see laid out on the left-hand bar. I'm still working there to assign corridors, assign personnel to where they need to be. Some of the cool things about the patient dialogue there, you can actually, if you can't help the patient, you can actually send them away. Now, you're going to lose money, obviously, but it's better than a death being on the record of your hospital. There I'm finding issues with employee workspace. Specific employees have to have specific workspaces. They can't do that, or they have to be assigned to those workspaces, otherwise it won't function correctly. You know, this when I really think about it, this entire capture, this whole series has been an experiment in a lot of different technologies that I hadn't used before, but I was relying on my media background to do things I hadn't done in a long time, and so that required me to learn how to use OBS properly. Which I had used professional systems before, but I hadn't used that one as an open source piece of software, but it's outstanding. The capture quality is great. The file size is really not large, considering you can see I walled those areas off and I put doors there. It's not really large compared to some of the other stuff I've used in the past. Not that I'm hurting for space. I've got plenty of space in here. I've got, something like 3 terabytes on the NAS. I've got 2 1 terabyte hard drives in the computer, not including the SSD, which is another 500 gig SSD that I basically run all the programs from. But for storage sake, I have those 2 1 terabyte hard drives that do a really good job and let me store the content away later for editing, and then take the edits and then push those out to YouTube. Checking in on patients, requesting certain diagnoses. In some cases, I assign specific doctors. If those stars get too low, what I've worked out is if they're like 2 to 3 stars, they're really in bad shape. And so I try to put the best doctors on them that I have available. So right now I've got 3 active patients in there. That one there is 2.5 stars. That one's 4. They're doing pretty well.